dumbfounded when I reach out to a complete stranger and say, hey, would you like to come all the way down to Greenwood and speak in front of a bunch of other strangers? And they say yes. And that makes me question, is this person okay? But always, 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 the answer has been yes, and that just lifts my heart to the type of people we have here in South Carolina, that they're willing to stand up, travel, and speak to whomever will listen when their cause is right and their cause is just. Our next speaker, Traci Fant, comes to us from Greenville. She came to my attention as I was doing research for my podcast on the topic of black superintendents of schools throughout our state who seem to be driven out by this Moms for Liberty wave. And one after another, all within a short time frame. And her name popped up as being on the front lines in Lawrence County, where such a story was unfolding. So I reached out to her on Facebook. She accepted, said yes. She has about 10,000 followers on Facebook, so I'm so glad she accepted my invite. Traci, everybody give her a warm welcome to Greenwood.
Well, thank you so much for the invite. A lot of people reach out to me on social media to ask me to speak at various events, and sometimes I can make it, other times I can't, but whenever I can, I'm sure to be in the room, so of course I truly appreciate the invite. Also, to the young men who spoke before me, you guys are phenomenal. Man, you guys are phenomenal. I appreciate you and your heart and everything that you put into what you do, because it's not easy. You know, people think that jumping out in a community, rallying for people to get out to vote, fighting for justice for families, being the voice for the voiceless is easy, but it's not. You know, and I remember when I was growing up, my grandmother, she used to walk around the house and she would sweep the floor and she would sing. But one day, as she was sweeping and singing, she looked at me and she said, sometimes the gift is heavy. The gift is heavy. My name is Traci Fant. I'm organizer of Freedom Fighters Upstate South Carolina, based in Greenville, South Carolina. However, as the young man stated, we travel throughout the state, throughout the United States, helping families that face injustices. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I had a beautiful childhood. I was introduced very early on about the importance of getting out to vote. I remember seeing my grandmother, my mother, my father, my family members prepare to vote. And they would be so excited about it. And I would just sit back and look like, wow, that's amazing, whatever voting is. My grandmother used to take me to the polls with her. My mom, we would walk up to Dearborn because we lived in Detroit, but we would walk to Dearborn where the closest polling place to our home was. And she would be so proud, so proud. I had the privilege of being raised under the leadership of Reverend Dr. Benjamin L. Hooks, who at the time was the national director of the NAACP, political activist who would have us kids at 10, 11, 12 years old at marches and protests and rallies. And I recall watching him speak to the masses. But not only that, on the third Sunday, he would have us out in the communities feeding the poor, feeding the homeless, passing out pamphlets, inviting people to come to church with us. I didn't understand at the time what that would do to my life and how that would affect me in my adulthood. They say train up a child, right? I didn't understand at the time that I was being trained up to walk into my purpose. At 12 years old, my father took me to meet Rosa Parks. I sat at her feet as she spoke to me about the movement. She spoke to me about Dr. King and everything that they went through to get to where we were at that time. She looked at me and she said, my child, the history books got it wrong. See, I was tired, but I wasn't tired from work that day. I was tired of getting pushed around, pushed to the back, denied. I was tired of being treated lesser than. And that's why I refused to give up my seat. Those words always stuck to me. Those words always stuck to me. And I remember, like I said, 12 years old, I'm in this lady's house. She's elderly. I'm not sure. She's Rosa Parks. That's cool. They got a street named after her. Okay, whatever. But I'm 12. So I'm sitting there looking around like, whoa, you know, she has a nice house. And as she showed me the pictures and she showed me some pamphlets, I remember her hand was shaking. And I would look and I would think to myself, wow, this is something. Because as I looked at my father, I could tell that he was so proud. If it made him happy, it made me happy. As I said, train up a child, right? It's very important that we introduce our children to people who are going to do positive things in their lives, who are going to leave positive images in their memories, who are going to put a stamp on their heart, give them something to reflect on as they go into this world of opposition, lost trust, dysfunction, bullying, social media. As we go into this world, what are we introducing our children to? I remember going to the mayor's office, right? And I looked at my mom and I was like, because at the time, Mayor Coleman A. Young, he was the mayor of Detroit. So my mom, you know, we would go to his office every now and then, and she would just walk around, and we would look at different things. But one day, I was able to sit in his seat. And I looked at my mother. I was like, this is pretty cool. And now as I visit the mayor's office here in Greenville and other places, I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool, right? See, I didn't understand then that God was directing a path for me. And my path was going to help lead others. My mother was incarcerated. And she spent about a year or so in prison. And I recall when she got out of prison, the one thing that bothered her was that she couldn't vote. That's all she would say. Every primary, every election, I can't vote. I want to vote. I can't vote. And I remember doing some research, and I went to her, and this is now when we moved to South Carolina a few years ago. I went to her and I said, Mom, you can vote. And she said, how so? And I said, well, even if you have a felony, if you've done all your paperwork, you completed everything that you were supposed to do, if your sentence is done, you can vote. And the light in her eyes when I said that, it spoke volumes to me. I said education is key. Because if my mother didn't know this, imagine how many other people didn't know. Because to me, my mom was like one of the most brilliant people I knew. And so if she didn't know she could vote, even having a felony, then others probably didn't as well. So, you know, he mentioned my social media platform, and it is large. I don't really look at the numbers, but you said 10,000, bro. You was off. Like, I got like 100-something thousand. You know, I'm just going to say that. You was off by 100,000. But anyway, you know, I make sure that I put out information for people. And so we sat back at the table a few minutes ago, and I was reading about today's primary, and I was explaining to my husband, you know, what it was. And I said to myself, I wonder how many people in our community know. I wonder how many people in our community know that today is the day that they can go and let their voices be heard. I hear so many young people saying it doesn't even matter anymore. So many young people saying they don't want to get out to vote. But I think back to when I met Miss Rosa Parks and the things that she told me they went through to get us to where we are today. Dogs attacking them and water hoses and all this stuff and marching and protesting and rallying and sit-ins and everything for us to have this simple right to vote. But if you don't do it, what are your ancestors thinking? What are they feeling? Why did they go through all this stuff for us to have this simple right and we refuse to go out and do it? Now, there was a moment when, I'm not going to lie, I kind of got to the point where I was like, does my vote really count? Does this really matter? Because we did so much to get people out to the polls. And we failed. But then I remember, you know, failing is only if you don't try again, right? And so even in those moments when I felt like, dang, like, I mean, we literally had buses taking people to the polls and everything. I don't even understand how. I was like, whoa, my mind was blown with it. Like, how did we not prevail, right? And I literally was wanting to give up. But again, like I said, you know, you only fail if you don't continue. And so we jumped back out there and started pushing it again. And still, you know, this is South Carolina. Like I said, I was raised in Detroit. That's the most democratic city on the planet. You know, I was born, you know, they tell you when you come out, you're a Democrat. You ain't, that's it. This is what you're going to do, you know. And so, like I said, you know, being born in Detroit, I never really saw us take losses like that. But then coming here in South Carolina, the terrain is different. And it's like, sometimes it does get tiring. Sometimes it does make you want to give up. But again, when I saw this young man right here speak, I'm like, man, look at little Dr. King over there. Look at little, you know what I'm saying? Look at him stepping up and doing what a lot of young people are afraid to do. Because like I said, it takes a lot to stand in front of a crowd of people and speak. Especially me, like I just speak from the heart. I don't write stuff down or whatever. I pray about it. I come up here and I deliver. And so again, I'm not going to hold y'all long. I'm like the pastor. I ain't going to hold you long. I just want to come up here and thank him for allowing me to be in your presence. And again, anytime you guys want me to come back to Greenwood, I'm more than happy to do so. Get out and vote, though. Don't give up. Peace.
Thank you, Traci. And first, let me say thank you personally for calling me a young man at the beginning of your speech. Did you hear all that? She looked at me and said, that young man. I was
You're
like,
probably younger than me, though.
I'm over 50, so maybe not.
Yeah, so am I.
Okay, well, we don't need to compare. We'll stop there.
I
know when to stop.
Right.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Fant?
Good morning. Most of y'all know me. I'm Pamela Morton. I'm a school counselor in Greenwood School District 50. I just noticed a theme. I know we're on Ms. Fant, but I kind of want to back up for just a minute. I went to wear shows, and I don't know if Josiah agree with me, but sometimes wear shows we act like we different, you know, set apart. You know what I'm saying? It's like a small town. But last year, Bill had a gentleman come in and talk to us about the Racial Justice League. And I'll be the first to tell you, you know, my mom used to say things, you know, and I would be like, oh, Mom, you know, racism, you know, that's back in the day until it happened to me. And I probably was like 12 years old the first time I experienced racism. And so after that, you know, it kind of stayed in the back of my mind what she was saying. But there's been a common thing, you know, they keep, each of them mentioned God. Each of them mentioned an older person that inspired them. When I was coming along, I look at Miss Bishop, I look at the family back there. I didn't have a choice. If wherever they were going, I had to go. Now we give our children a choice, and it's being seen in the school system. We give them a choice. They need to know this stuff. We need to take them wherever we're going, and then you'll end up with people like Josiah. Then Mr. Campbell, same thing. He said, I made a mistake. I lost my office. We're too big. We're too quick to count people out.
That's right.
Too quick, especially our young children. We're too quick. They make a mistake. We're too quick to count them out. He moved, but he came back. In my mind, he regrouped. Look at him now. Look at the difference that he's making. And then she said that, was it your grandmother you said would be singing?
Yeah.
You know, she would hear her grandmother singing, and then she would stop and look at her. She made me think about my mom when she said that, because my mom, you know, she had the greatest voice, but she would sing. Everything she did, she would sing, and it usually was hymns and things like that. But again, I didn't know my history. I'm trying to learn more. And that's what we have to do is educate. We have to, Ms. Campbell, he regrouped himself. He went back to college. Look at what he's doing now. And that's what I've been trying to do ever since he brought the speaker. I don't make every meeting, but I try to go to the Racial Justice League meetings. And what we have did is you try to divide and conquer. So we have chosen venues that we will go, we will listen, and we will bring back the information. Well, I chose Ware Shoals School Board. I've been going, even though I don't live in Ware Shoals anymore, I've been going to the school board meetings, and I bring back information to the Racial Justice League. That's the only way that we're going to make a difference, is we have to participate. We have to take action. Every little thing counts. The phone calling, I wanted to take part in that, but every time he had a training, I had something else to do, so I wasn't able. So I'm glad to see that it was completed, because I really wanted to take part in that, and I wasn't able to. But other people did. If we each do our part, we can't worry about the people who aren't here today, but we should be bringing somebody with us every single time we come. But like I said, just the theme. Martin Luther King, he was a pastor. They met in churches, So this separation of church and state, that's what's wrong with us, is we've forgotten who's truly the head. And I know this is not church. Everybody may not be a Christian, but we've forgotten who's truly the head. Why do you think it says in the thing, under God, liberty and justice for all? That used to be what we were about. We were a country and a state that God was in the forefront, and he's been taken out. And so it can be done, y'all. It can be done. But we've got to light a fire under ourselves, and then we've got to light a fire. The children, they may not be able to vote right now, but they can still do something. They can do something. They can participate. So I just, just sitting here, something just got all over me listening to these three speakers. Thank you. Right,
and like you said, though, it's about what you put your children in front of. And that's why I started off like that, because, again, like seeing my mother go out and vote, seeing my grandmother, seeing my family get excited about it, even when I didn't know what going to vote was, and then being put in the places and the spaces where people who were deeply involved with the civil rights movement, who allowed us these opportunities that we quickly forget about. It's 2024. Ain't too many people thinking about what happened in 1960. But we're not, if you think about it, we're not too far removed from it. And that's because as a society, we haven't really grown from it. Hence my organization, I forgot he told me to tell y'all, Freedom Fighters Upstate, social justice movement. And like I said, we're based in Greenville, South Carolina, but a lot of people reach out to me about different injustices. So a couple of years ago, there was a couple of voting locations that people were having trouble going to vote, like getting in to vote. And so we put a lot of media attention on that. And of course the issue was quickly resolved. However, if people aren't educated, if they don't have the knowledge, if they don't have the understanding that this is your right, this is your right. You can't deny me my rights. And so as people, we have to understand also the importance of coming together. Like she said, and I'm not just talking about black people coming together. I'm talking about all people coming together. When you look at the marches, the civil rights movement, Dr. King, it wasn't just a whole bunch of black people out there marching. It was everybody that believed in what he was saying, believed in freedom and justice and equality. Everybody that had that shared that belief was there. And so that's what we need to create, a platform of shared beliefs where people aren't afraid to use their voices and come out and say, this is what I stand for. I'm willing to listen to your ideas, but this is what I stand for.
This relates to Rosa Parks. My husband and I were raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he had a very similar Rosa Parks experience. His mother was hospitalized, and was not able, had to go to bed for a while. So their maid either moved in with them or became much more active. Well, they had to go buy groceries together, and they got on the bus in Charlotte one day and had the same incident. The little redneck bus driver said, "You ain't sitting up front, you got to go to the back." And this little fella right here was 10, and he says, "Excuse me, sir, you don't know who my father is. We're going to sit right here." And he said, "Pearl, you sit down, and I'll sit down beside you." And he said, "This ain't going to happen." So I just thought that was kind of neat, and it is truth. My mother said it ain't bragging if it's the truth, and that is a true story.
That's cool.
North Carolina in 1970, 67. So Robert did that too.
And let me tell you this too. Also, to continue on from the people that I met through the civil rights movement and everything, right? Like I said, Rosa Parks, Benjamin L. Hooks, Mayor Coleman A. Young, so many others. But when I came to South Carolina, I was connected with Reverend Jesse Jackson. And we would go to meetings. I would be the youngest person in some of their meetings. So I'd always have different ideas about things. And so one day he was like, let's hear from Freedom Fighter. And I was like, wow, okay. And so after that, every meeting, every time he saw me, he greeted me as Freedom Fighter, hence the name of my organization. So I told him one day, I said, I'm going to start an organization, a nonprofit, and I'm going to call it Freedom Fighters Upstate. And he just laughed a little bit. He was like, okay. But when I started the organization, I saw him again, and I told him, he was like, that's cool, but I'm going to tell you what's even crazier. One day he called me by my name. He called me Traci, and I'm like, I didn't even know you knew my name. He said, yeah, I know your name is Traci, but I call you Freedom Fighter because you have the heart of a freedom fighter. He said, you're not afraid to take that step. You're not afraid to speak out. And so that's another thing I meant to say, but,
I'm from Saluda County, and I worked the voters registration office all week long, early voting, and I was amazed of the turnout. It wasn't good at all.
Right.
So if I could say something to encourage you, you that are here today, encourage the people that you talk to vote. It's important. And as Traci said, it is your right, and it is their right. Right. So we got to get back to voting.
Well, the thing is, I don't think people understand the importance of the primary. That's just it. Like a lot of people, it's primary. I get another shot in June. I get another shot in November. And so, that's just it. It's like, because my friend's mother, she worked at Pickens. She told me the same thing. She was like, some days they didn't have anybody. Like, and they were there from, 8 to 6 or whatever. They were there like all day, so. But you had something you wanted to say, right? I don't mean to take over your meeting, but I really wanted to hear what he had to say.
Thank you, Ms. Fant. To go back to what you said about young people and voting, you really hit the nail on the head with that. You would not believe the amount of times that people just sort of downplay the things that our ancestors did for us to have that right. Even people my age sort of downplay it. It's like, blah, that's nothing, I don't need to vote. People died for you to even get an education. What are you doing sitting around?
That's right. See, I knew he was going to say something phenomenal, see?
Thank you for not dropping the mic. This is an expensive piece of
right?
equipment. I saw you were tempted to.
Right.
But thank you.
That's good.
Round of applause again for Traci,
Thank you
please.
so much.
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much. I am going to take away from that and just always remember Traci talking about how she met Rosa Parks, somebody who's right out of the history book, just leapt right off the page, and she met her. And I look around this room, and I think there's going to be some young person that's going to one day say, I met Senator Floyd Nicholson. I met Barbara Jackson. There's going to be a young person who said, I met Traci. I met Quadjo. I know there's going to be a lot of young people that said, I met Josiah Gary back in the day. I know that. Nobody's going to remember Bill, though. But I'm okay with that. Well, that's a wrap for today. I thank you very much. I appreciate it. This was a great meeting, great attendance. Everybody make sure you get out and vote.